God bless America. Hello everybody, I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, another victory for the Trump agenda. The Supreme Court has voted to uphold the travel ban. In the majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts authoring, finally, the claim of discrimination was rejected. Now, I don't think you had to reject the discrimination claim in order to uphold the travel ban, because if you're going to, discrimination is part of immigration policy. You're discriminating between which people you want to let in and which people you don't want to let in. This is just the nature of being careful about who you let into the country, about sound immigration policy. So we're going to read through this Associated Press story, and we're going to have a look at, we're going to read a couple of samples of these opinions, and then maybe at a later date we'll go through and read the opinion and the dissents and see what they have to say. So let's get right into it. A sharply divided Supreme Court on Tuesday upheld President Donald Trump's ban on travel from several mostly Muslim countries, rejecting a challenge that it discriminated against Muslims or exceeded his authority. A dissenting justice said the outcome was a historic mistake. Well, already, what do we have? We have one person arguing on the merits of the case, and we have another person arguing based on their subjective opinion. I'll let you decide who those two people are. The 5-4 decision Tuesday is a big victory for Trump on an issue that is central to his presidency and the court's first substantive ruling on a Trump administration policy. The president quickly tweeted his reaction. Wow. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion for the 5 conservative justices, including Trump nominee Neil Gorsuch. Now, Scalia, along with Gorsuch and one other justice whose name eludes me at the moment, wrote a supplementary opinion where they partially concurred and partially dissented in the Roberts opinion. But that's something that we won't be getting to today. Roberts wrote that presidents have substantial power to regulate immigration. He also rejected the challenger's claim of anti-Muslim bias. Now, one thing I forgot. Anthony Kennedy votes one time in favor of the Trump administration, and suddenly he's a conservative justice. Now, if you watched the previous video where I talked about the Supreme Court, I think you'll understand what my opinion is on Kennedy. But anyway, he was careful not to endorse either Trump's provocative statements about immigration in general or Muslims in particular, including Trump's campaign pledge to keep Muslims from entering the country. We express no view on the soundness of the policy, Roberts wrote, and I think that is a proper statement. It is not the court's place to pass judgment upon the propriety of a law or policy outside of its constitutionality, at least in as far as precedent goes. You know, it's court precedent that the Supreme Court has holds the power of judicial review, and they have it's the court's jurisdiction to rule on whether or not federal law or policy that is implemented that affects the federal government is constitutional or not. And in that case, this is the ruling that they're making. The Supreme Court should not be ruling on whether or not Trump's campaign rhetoric is constitutional or not. They should be ruling on whether or not Trump's policy is constitutional or not. And that's precisely what the majority did in this case. If it was 5-4 the other way, then based on what Justice Sotomayor wrote, the court would be passing judgment on whether or not Trump's rhetoric was constitutional or not, and that would be judicial activism. But let's read on. The travel ban has been fully in place since December, when the justices put the brakes on lower court rulings that had ruled the policy out of bounds and had blocked part of it from being enforced. In a dissent she summarized in court, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said, "History will not look kindly on the court's misguided decision today, nor should it." Justices Stephen Breyer, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Elena Kagan also dissented. So, right as of this point, the Associated Press have not cited to me anything in the dissenting opinion that is founded in constitutionality or constitutional law. They've simply only cited Justice Sonia Sotomayor's opinion, her subjective opinion on whether or not the travel ban is right. They have not cited for me whether or not she thinks it's on what grounds she thinks it's unconstitutional. Sotomayor wrote, based on quote-unquote the evidence in the case, a reasonable observer would conclude the proclamation was motivated by anti-Muslim animus. She said her colleagues in the majority arrived at the opposite result by, quote, ignoring the facts, misconstruing our legal precedent, and turning a blind eye to the pain and suffering the proclamation inflicts on countless families and individuals, many of whom are United States citizens. Okay, number one, I call bologna sandwich. What evidence is Sonia Sotomayor basing her opinion on? So far, the Associated Press have not cited any of that for me. If I'm going to assume that Sonia is basing her opinion on Trump's campaign rhetoric, and to that I would say, so what? What does Trump's campaign rhetoric have to do with the policy as it's being implemented? If you believe, based on his campaign rhetoric, that this executive order is meant to be a ban on all Muslims from entering the United States, then this is the worst Muslim ban that has ever been conceived. And I would cite for you this from Breitbart. The Muslim ban exempts 87% of Muslims. Only 13% of Muslims are quote-unquote banned from entering the United States of America. Even if this proclamation were a Muslim ban, Congress has given the president vast authority to ban all Muslims. And I cite for you 8 U.S. Code Section 1182, Paragraph F, that says, whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such a period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Remember the U word from last week, from some of last week's video, or the I word rather, from some of last week's videos. Indefinite. Trump could, if he so desired, based on his subjective understanding of the detriment to the country, impose an indefinite travel ban, indefinite entry ban on all Muslims into the United States, and it would be totally within his executive authority to do so, based on 8 U.S. Code Section 1182. The Supreme Court has no constitutional grounds on which to say that it is unconstitutional for the president to ban all Muslims. It is only by their subjective moral opinion that they say so. Let us return now to the Associated Press column and continue to read. Sotomayor wrote based on the evidence that blah, 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 blah. She likened the case to the discredited Korematsu versus U.S. decision that upheld the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II. Roberts responded in his opinion that Korematsu has nothing to do with this case and was gravely wrong the day it was decided. I totally agree with Roberts in this statement. On what earth is this travel ban 1% similar to the unconstitutional internment of American citizens of Japanese ancestry? I totally agree that it was unconstitutional for a Democrat president to intern United States citizens of Japanese ancestry without due process. I totally agree that that was an unconstitutional thing to do, Democrats. It was your beloved FDR that did this. Let me point out that interned Japanese under this policy were American citizens, and banned, quote-unquote, and banned Muslims. I won't put the quote-unquotes around that because it's not just Muslims that are affected by this travel ban. Banned Muslims under this proclamation are not United States citizens. In fact, as we're going to read in a few moments, Muslims that are United States citizens are exempted from this travel ban. Interned Japanese under that unconstitutional policy had their liberty restricted, had their property unconstitutionally seized from them. They were unconstitutionally imprisoned, contrary to their rights as American citizens. Banned Muslims are only having what I would call a tremendous privilege restricted by this travel ban. I would call immigration to the United States of America a tremendous privilege. And that tremendous privilege is being restricted by the president. And the authority to restrict this privilege has been given to the president by the United States Congress. Let us read on. The travel ban was among the court's biggest cases in this term, and the latest in a string of 5-4 decisions in which the conservative side of the court, bolstered by the addition of Gorsuch last year, prevailed. Gorsuch was nominated by Trump after Republicans in the Senate refused to grant a hearing to federal appeals judge Merrick Garland, who was appointed by Barack Obama with more than 10 months remaining in Obama's term. Now, let's have a brief chat about this little gem that Democrats love to harp on. They whine and moan and complain about how Merrick Garland was not given a hearing by the Senate. Now, in my opinion, it was entirely within the Senate's rights to refuse to give Merrick Garland a hearing. If the Senate decided, we're not going to, a majority is not going to approve Merrick Garland, therefore we don't see the reason to give him a hearing, then I would think that would be a fine judgment call. That would be a judgment call by the United States Senate, and that would be fine. I will say so if the Democrats retake control of the Senate and refuse to give a hearing to any of Trump's appointments. I will not be happy about that, but I will, for the sake of consistency, say that it is within the Congress's right to do so. Congress is not bound by the Constitution that they must give a confirmation hearing to any of the president's appointments. It is very obstructionist of them to do so. Whether or not you think obstructionism is a good thing or not is up to you, but it's within their rights. Even if they had given Merrick Garland a confirmation hearing, I don't think that it was incumbent upon the Congress to confirm Merrick Garland. I think that it was a strategic decision made by Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Senate leadership to not give Merrick Garland a confirmation hearing, because then it might have been incumbent upon the Senate to vote on Merrick Garland, and it might have given some of the more liberal Republicans of the Senate a cop-out to vote to confirm Merrick Garland, which I think would have been a mistake. Now, we didn't get to hear Merrick Garland's confirmation hearing, so we didn't get to hear whether or not Merrick Garland would have made for a good Supreme Court justice. Based on President Obama's other Supreme Court justice appointments, namely Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, I think that Merrick Garland would have been an atrocious Supreme Court justice. But that's just speculation on my part. Let's move right along. The Trump policy applies to travelers from 5 countries with overwhelmingly Muslim populations: Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. It also affects 2 non-Muslim countries, blocking travelers from North Korea and some Venezuelan government officials and their families. A 6th majority Muslim country, Chad, was removed from the list in April after improving, quote, its identity management and information sharing practices, Trump said in a proclamation. The administration had pointed to the Chad decision to show that the restrictions are premised only on national security concerns. And this was the whole point of the travel ban. This is what the Trump administration has been saying since day one of bringing version 1 of this travel ban to the public. And that is that we're trying to slow down, or we're trying to stop travel from these countries that don't have good vetting processes, because we can't tell who's coming into our country very well. The challengers, though, argued that the court could not just ignore all that has happened, beginning with Trump's campaign tweets to prevent the entry of Muslims into the United States. So they're saying that what Trump said in the campaign should outweigh what the policy actually says, which is, again, bologna sandwich. The travel ban has long been central to Trump's presidency. He proposed a broad, all-encompassing Muslim ban during the presidential campaign in 2015, drawing swift rebukes from Republicans as well as Democrats, and within a week of taking office, the first travel ban was announced with little notice, sparking chaos at airports and protests across the nation. Now, the protests were rip-roaring and ready to go, and I think it was the protests that caused the chaos at airports across the nation. But that's my opinion. The broad, all-encompassing Muslim ban, I think, was partially a knee-jerk reaction to the Pulse nightclub shooting. If you so desire, Google that phrase, Trump all-encompassing Muslim ban, and I think you will find, you might have to scroll down a little bit in your Google search results, so it might be a little bit strenuous research, but you should be able to find a CNN article where they quote a Trump press release where Trump, after the Pulse nightclub shooting, was calling for a stop to Muslim immigration because, and I think the language went, we can't tell what these people are thinking, something to that effect. While the ban has changed shape since then, it has remained a key part of Trump's America First vision, with the president believing that the restriction, taken in tandem with his promised wall at the southern border, would make the United States safer from potentially hostile foreigners. In a statement he released Tuesday morning, Trump hailed the decision as a moment of profound vindication, following months of hysterical commentary from the media and Democratic politicians who refuse to do what it takes to secure our border and our country. Strongly disagreeing, Democratic Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota said, "This decision will someday serve as a marker of shame." Ellison, the first Muslim elected to Congress, and Senator Mazi Hirano of Hawaii, who was born in Japan, both compared the ban to the ruling of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Again, on what earth is this travel ban 1% similar to the illegal internment of Americans of Japanese descent during World War II? I call bologna sandwich. Critics of Trump's ban urged the justices to affirm the decision in lower courts that generally concluded that the changes made to the travel policy did not erase the ban's legal problems. The ban, BS, first of all, bologna sandwich. The ban has no legal problems. The ban has, it's not what you said, it's the way you said it problems, according to the Democrats. The current version dates from last September, and it followed what the administration has called a thorough review by several federal agencies, although no such review has been shared with the courts and the public. The president doesn't have to rely on views from federal agencies. Based on Section 8, or U.S. Code, 8 U.S. Code, Section 1182, the president can ban whoever he wants from immigrating into the country on a whim, is my interpretation of the law. Federal trial judges in Hawaii and Maryland had blocked the travel ban from taking effect, finding that the new version looked too much like its predecessors, those rulings that were largely upheld by federal appeal courts in Richmond, Virginia, and San Francisco. But the Supreme Court came to a different conclusion. The policy has a legitimate legal grounding in national security concerns, and it has several moderating factors, including a waiver program that would allow some people from the affected countries to enter the United States, Roberts said. The administration has said that 809 people have received waivers since the ban took full effect in December. Roberts wrote that presidents have frequently used their power to talk to the nation, to espouse principles of religious freedom and tolerance on which the nation was founded. But he added, that presidents and the country have not always lived up to those inspiring words. The challengers to the ban asserted that Trump's statements crossed a constitutional line, but the issue before us is not whether to denounce the statements. It is instead the significance of those statements in reviewing a presidential directive, neutral on its face, addressing a matter within the core of executive responsibility. And I agree wholeheartedly with this final statement from Roberts. The issue that the Supreme Court should be commenting on is not whether or not Trump's words in the campaign were nice. The court should be talking about whether or not Trump has the duly delegated to him authority to restrict immigration of a class of citizens. And as I have pointed out to you and cited in great detail, 8 U.S. Code Section 1182, paragraph F, the president does indeed have the authority to do this. And therefore, the Supreme Court should, what's the word I'm looking for? Should acknowledge that authority and defer to the president's authority in banning these immigrants from entry into the United States of America. But let me know what you guys think. Tell me down in the comments if you agree, disagree, if you think that the Supreme Court is being activist or restrained in this ruling. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you want to see more content like it, hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Make sure that you don't miss a single video by checking back here every weekday for a new report. Thank you again so much for watching. Come back next time. Until then, good night and God bless.